Good morning, Franklin Township, and welcome to the March 9, 2021 edition of the Franklin Reporter and Advocate News Hour. I am your co-host, Bill Bowman, editor of the Franklin Reporter and Advocate.
Oh, lost your sound.
Did I?
Yes.
Well, how did you hear me if I lost my sound? And who are you, PJ?
Do I have sound? Then I can say who I am?
Yes.
Yes, PJ Parker, also Franklin Reporter and Advocate, co-publisher, advertising director, and girl about town.
And today we have an interesting program. As you probably know or should know, Governor Murphy recently signed long-awaited legislation legalizing adult use recreational marijuana with very limited, I guess, under limited circumstances. In New Jersey, it was something that a huge majority of New Jersey voters approved last November in the election. It took the legislature a long time to work out the details of the bill. So we have one of the architects of the bill with us today, our very own homegrown, so to speak.
Leafy boy.
A very own homegrown legislator, State Assemblyman Joe Danielsen. And that just came to me. And he's very intimately involved in the process. He was really intimately involved in the process of getting medical marijuana legalized. He had listening sessions throughout the state. We covered them when he had them, and did a lot of research and into the issue. So this bill has implications for law enforcement. It has implications for business, and that's something that we're interested here in Franklin. Mm-hmm. Township Council, I think it was last year, approved changes in, I believe it was the manufacturing zones that would allow for, at the time, medical marijuana dispensaries and growing facilities. So
Franklin now is almost a designated preferential site.
Well,
for the growing.
They're
we have a lot of farmland. It's not impossible.
Well, they're prepared. Franklin has set itself up to accept, and I believe there are folks who are already knocking on the door. So without any further ado, let's bring in State Assemblyman Joe Danielsen. Hello, Assemblyman Danielsen. Welcome to the News Hour, and publicly, happy birthday to you today.
Yes.
Good morning, Franklin Reporter and Advocate, and good morning, Franklin Township.
Yes, you look like the birthday boy today.
I feel like the birthday boy. My morning started with my daughter saying, "Hey, Dad, you look like you have a few more gray hairs." Mom, how do you feel about that?
Oh, that's cute.
Thank goodness for daughter.
Said, please, that's the least I have to put up with.
That's right. You have a beautiful family. I think you can put up with all of it.
Then I announced I have two of the best children in the world, and then I left the house and let them fight it out.
That was good. That was very good.
Yeah, we torture each other. It's a fun household.
That is what the family is for, is to mutual torture, right?
Right.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and my kids are getting really good with it.
Well, it's interesting that you have kids who are of the age that now it's going to be legal for marijuana use. How you feel?
Well, it won't be legal for my kids just yet. I don't have any 21 or older children.
Mm-hmm.
Still illegal for those under 21.
Okay, so as you segued,
being a parent of teenagers,
exactly,
being an experienced past teenager, growing up with teenagers, knowing teenagers, I can assure you, and I can assure all the parents out there, if you were a parent of a teenager, at one time or another, you had marijuana in your house, if you knew it or not.
Very true.
I don't kid myself. I found it in my house, and I conducted a thorough investigation. The investigation did not last as long as it took me to get rid of the marijuana. A little bit each day.
A little bit.
I have a funny story about that. When I was growing up, I had two brothers. I, of course, was the innocent one, and my mother had a green thumb. My mother
I was
could
the innocent
grow
one too.
anything, and my mother got a little tiny plant from them, and it was this big, and she kept pinching it back and watering it, spraying it, and it became this big and this big, and it was a gigantic bush. She had no idea she was growing marijuana in her own home. And my brothers, little angels that they were, would be picking off the leaves and developing little side entrepreneurships for themselves. And it was not a pretty sight when she tossed the plant. But yeah, my mother grew grass.
Unwittingly.
Oh gosh.
So Joe, let's start off by just laying the foundation. Can you go through the basic tenets of this legislation?
Sure, Bill. It's a good question. So basically, we have decriminalized pot. We have decriminalized marijuana, cannabis. It's now not illegal. That decriminalization started with the voters of New Jersey overwhelmingly electing through a free and fair and credible election for a constitutional change. We knew many years ago through polling that the vast majority of New Jerseyans, practically 70% of them, which is typical around the country, think it's a waste of time and ludicrous to criminalize marijuana. It's been in our communities for thousands of years. You can't overdose on it. And the only one benefiting from marijuana nowadays is the cartels, the gangs, and the street dealers. Everyone also understands that when you buy pot on the street, you don't know what they put inside it. Mm-hmm. Certainly Americans want convenience, they want safety and stability. That's why we know how to make our own beer and wine, but we still go to the liquor store. We know how to make our pizza, but we still go to the pizzeria. Convenience, safety, and consistency. And that's what lifting up this industry is doing. So after the voters, the citizens of New Jersey changed the Constitution, it takes legislation to change the statutes. So from January 1st until the day the governor signed the bill, we had a constitution that said that pot was legal, but we had statutes that say the pot was criminal. So we had to change the statutes, and that's where the debates, the vigorous conversations, the arguments, the arm wrestling happen. It's in the details that it's not easy to accomplish. Right. So one of the, just to jump to the difficult part, one of the final areas to dealt with is what happens with minors as it comes to the police interaction.
Yes.
To understand that conversation, you have to understand this, and this is an indisputable fact. Black people and Latino people have been disproportionately levied upon with the criminal law as it relates to cannabis. Disproportionately, Black people get stopped more by police. They get investigated more. They get arrested more. They get charged more, and they get convicted more. And age, that transcends all age groups. So when we're talking about children, once a minor is entered into the system, the aging out duration is expanded. Like aging out meaning like, you get in trouble once when you're 15, you don't get in trouble again before you're 18. But now that moves to 23 or 25 years old or 30 years old. Each time you get a record of arrest or a charge or a conviction, the next encounter you have with police, you're a much greater likelihood of being deeper, getting a deeper involvement with law enforcement and the criminal system. Listen, if you've ever been pulled over by a police officer, one of the questions they almost always ask is, do you have any points on your license? Why? Because if you say yes, well, you're just a recidivistic offender. So if you say no, it's more likely you won't get that ticket, assuming it's true. So the whole wrangling of the cannabis bill centered on what happens with minors. So they didn't want the law enforcement community to take advantage, not take advantage. They wanted to stop law enforcement community from having the opportunity to process juveniles into the system with cannabis, because that's where the trouble begins. That they wanted to basically stop any possibility of a juvenile from having a record, because I'm concerned with that. As a parent, if one of my children between the ages of 13 and 18 gets arrested or gets charged or gets convicted, it'll stop them from getting into college. It'll stop them from getting certain jobs. It'll stop them from getting certain licenses issued by the state or the federal government. It really will ruin much of their opportunity, not all of it, but a lot of it, for the rest of their lives, until maybe you go through a long, painful, expensive process to get that offense or arrest expunged. And depending on the situation, that expungement is not easy. Depending on which law enforcement agency you were involved with and where and the circumstances.
Hmm.
Even attorneys find it difficult process sometimes. So I joined members of the Black Caucus and the Latino Caucus and those communities in New Jersey for having that conversation. That wasn't an area I was pushing, but I certainly stood back on the sidelines and encouraged the conversation, as it went along. And finally, they settled on the details. And listen, this is democracy, so nothing's perfect. My guess is, and I'm being told, there's a follow-up bill that's being considered to further amend the statute as it relates to minors. And I'm looking forward to reading that bill because again, nothing's perfect. This is democracy. You can't force someone to vote one way or the other. So you have to negotiate.
Can you talk a little bit about what is allowed in this bill? I mean, what are the parameters? If I want to toke, what are the parameters that I have to follow?
Okay, well, you can legally buy it from an adult use dispensary, which are not open yet. Or if you are a medical patient, a registered medical patient, you could go now and purchase it from an alternate treatment center that are around the state. I mean, we have one in Branchburg, and the other close one would be Woodbridge. And you could go there, and you could smoke it anywhere you could smoke cigarettes. You still, if you're under the influence, you cannot drive or operate machinery. And or you could, what most people do is either vape it or consume it through edibles or oils.
Okay.
But once the adult use dispensaries are up and going, and they will be, well, actually, the ATCs, the medical dispensaries will be able to start selling adult cannabis right away. They're grandfathered in. They're immediately included, which is a good thing.
So anywhere that smoking is banned, marijuana smoking is banned, like in county parks and buildings, that sort of thing.
That's right. And then you're prohibited from some public areas from smoking cannabis, not consuming it, but smoking it. Just mostly because of the pungent smell.
What about private use? Referring to that pungent smell. And so much documentation that the secondhand smoke from marijuana is even more dangerous to the human lungs than tobacco smokers. someone could be allergic to marijuana smoke who may not be as allergic to tobacco smoke. Somebody in condo communities, such as where I am in a townhouse community, where my deck butts up against someone else's patio. And
Yeah, same rules for cigarettes.
yeah, but there's a different effect. I mean, you have a residual effect. It's awful, of course, to have to breathe in secondhand smoke, but now you're adding an element of enhanced function, being polite,
right.
getting high,
So,
and if you don't choose to get high and you have no choice.
The smell of marijuana goes much further than the actual smoke, and by the time if you're 8 feet away, there's not going to be barely any detectable compounds of one or another in that smoke. So, that's why it's allowed. The other,
it permeates the air. That is a very distinguishable smell.
Right. And again, let me stress, the smell travels hundreds of times more than the smoke itself. And, but you should also know, smoking of dry cannabis is going down. It's plummeting. Less and less people smoke marijuana today than they did 5 years ago. What's going up is processed goods, either in oils to vape them or to tincture under the tongue, gummy bears, brownies, cookies, creams. Those products are going up. I'm guessing in 10 years, the only people that smoke marijuana are going to be the same people that still use a CB radio.
It remains to be seen.
Smoking's outdated because when you burn anything and inhale that smoke into your lung, that's what's become very unhealthy and carcinogenic. But vaping just heats it up to like 250 degrees, far below burning, just to the point where the oils and the compounds they produce steam, and then you inhale that. It's much less unhealthy than actually smoking it. But even more so is more healthy option is to put to take an extract and put it into something that's consumable.
Right.
Now, consumabilities don't affect everybody. There is a metabolic process that needs to happen in your liver for an edible to have any psychoactive effect, and 15% of humans don't possess the enzyme required in the liver to process that. So then you're going to have to absorb it another way, like oils under the tongue or something, or a skin patch, subdermal patch, or another way that doesn't have to go through your stomach and get to the liver.
Interesting.
And those people might smoke.
There've been a number of studies, and I remember we attended a lecture by someone who was lecturing against the uses of vaping, and it actually is more dangerous to vape marijuana smoke.
Yeah. So there's here's something I learned when
lung disease associated.
When a speaker assigned cannabis to me, he interviewed me. He wanted to make sure I didn't have a position. He wanted to make sure I didn't know really anything about cannabis and that I had no interest in the field. Almost everybody I interviewed, I investigated that person. I want to know their background. I want to know who's paying them.
Right. What's their stake in it?
Right. You will find that there are more times than not, people who talk negatively about cannabis. They are being financed by someone they're being paid to say that. They're being paid to say that. But you're going to see those people go away faster and faster because now you see pharmaceutical companies making investments into cannabis, and they're not going to bet against themselves. You see even Mr. Kennedy came from New England to testify to New Jersey legislature a couple of times against vaccines and against cannabis. And he was fully financed in the millions by the pharmaceutical companies to stop or slow down the legislation.
Hey,
So they lose their integrity with me.
sure, Joe. Can you circle back just a second? You said something about restricting smoking in areas because in certain public areas because of the pungent smell. Can you go into a little more about that?
Well, so we don't want anyone disturbing the peace. We want people to have the option and the liberty to use cannabis products in any form, but we also don't want to bother people or negatively affect people. So we basically mirrored the ability to smoke.
Mm-hmm.
Might it be cannabis or tobacco? They get the same rules.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, cannabis has a couple of other rules about. And you have to forgive me. I forget some of the details, but there are some public areas you cannot smoke cannabis. Doesn't mean you can't consume cannabis. You just can't smoke it.
Mm-hmm.
However, that poses a problem for medical patients and non-medical patients. There are some people who live in federal housing. You can't smoke marijuana there because it's a Schedule I federal drug. You have some people that can't bring it home regardless of where they live because their family situation is one of that's not trusting, meaning someone in the family will probably steal it.
Mm-hmm.
So they can't bring it home. So you got people that can't consume it, can't bring it home, can't store it at home. So we devised what's called a consumption area. Consumption area is a dedicated area that a dispensary can build and provide where you can buy the cannabis in one room and going over to another room to consume it. And you can rent a locker and put your stuff there. However, that bothers some people, some politicians, right? That, we don't want that happening in my town. So that consumption area is permissive. In order to have a consumption area, the township council has to vote to allow consumption areas in their town. And that is a 1-year permit. So the township can take it away as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they can enforce it and they can regulate it. But I can assure you that a consumption area is probably the best part of the whole cannabis legislation because you have a safe, secure, allowable area. And I can almost guarantee you it's going to be extremely well ventilated with air filters. So you don't have the smell going on. People are going to do that. I mean, we also know New Jerseyans want cigar bars,
right.
cigar houses, but they're not allowed.
Going. Exactly.
You don't, PJ. I know you don't want Bill smoking a cigar in your house.
I don't want anybody smoking a cigar anywhere near it.
But if he was smoking a cigar on your patio, it's going to be just as disruptive as the cannabis being smoked on your patio.
Right.
Exactly.
But it'd be nice if we could go down to Cloud 9 on 27 and be able to smoke a hookah, a cigar, or a joint.
Was the difference between smoking it and ingesting it is that smoking affects anybody else within several feet of the smoke itself. You ingest a brownie, that's a solitary consumptible act. That doesn't affect anybody else. You put it in your mouth, you chew it up, you swallow it, it's done. The effects of that act affect no one else but the consumer. Whereas smoke in any form is going to affect anybody within an inch. Within 10 feet.
I agree.
I think that's a problem.
There should be dedicated areas for people to practice a legal activity.
I agree.
From smoking cigars to smoking marijuana, even skateboarding. Look at skateboarding. My son skateboards, my daughter skateboards, but they're not allowed to skateboard down the street. They're not allowed to skateboard on the sidewalk. they're not allowed to skateboard on the basketball court, the park 2 blocks away from my house. So
Is
why
that a
don't, why don't
noise
we
factor
provide
or
them
safety factor?
provide them a skateboard park? It's the same analogy. Provide
Yes,
a
again,
provide
yes
a
and no.
area.
Okay,
Your
but
son goes down a skateboard down your street. It's a momentary noise action that somebody might object to, but it's not going to affect their health on a possible permanent
It'll
level.
affect their health. It's not allowed, PJ, because it's caused motor vehicle accidents.
Well, whatever the reason for it, and I applaud that for sure. But my point being, and I'm a very anti-tobacco smoking or anything that you can smoke and spew that air out into somebody else's lungs. I mean, your right to smoke ends at my nose because
Right.
I then cannot avoid your habit, whether I choose to or not.
So the bill does a lot of other things here. First of all,
well, hang on, Joe, just 1 second. I just want to get back to this idea of the smoking lounge. I'm sure there's all sorts of
consumption area.
consumption. Well, okay, it's a smoking lounge. I walk.
Most of the consumption is not being smoked.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll give you that. I go. I drive down to my local consumption area bar, and I go in and I don't know. I'm there maybe an hour. I'm smoking a couple joints I walk out baked. Am I going to get back in my car and drive home?
You're not supposed to.
I know, but okay. So there's a little
There's a difference.
There's an issue there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Someone drives to this place. How are they getting home?
Well, are you asking that about every bar in the country?
Well, I think you can regulate alcohol a lot better than you can regulate the effect of marijuana.
Again, alcohol is a solid.
Show me the science.
Well, I don't know. I'm just spitballing here.
Yeah, so similar to alcohol, every body has a different tolerance and effect with cannabis as it does with alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And then the continued use of both of them then morphs into a different tolerance level and impact. That is indisputable fact. But the law says you cannot operate a motor vehicle under the influence of anything.
Right.
You have to maintain your alertness and your reaction to operate anything, even a bicycle on the street.
Sure.
All right, let me carry that to another conclusion. I inherit secondhand smoke from somebody who's smoking marijuana next to me. Now I am high.
Well,
I get in my car having not smoked one bit of this, then I'm still liable. I think that's just the potentiality of
Yeah.
There's a lot of danger involved in the smoking of it.
There's not a lot of danger.
Problem. Put it in the brownies. Put it in wherever it goes.
Okay, so
having it
that's very
in the
unlikely.
air,
That's a very remote circumstance.
But
very remote.
It's not impossible. You put two people in a consumable, consumption center, and one of them isn't smoking, one of them is keeping the other who's smoking company. That person walks out the door with a lungful, who has not deliberately done so. I think the effect is going to be the same. That person gets in a car. That's dangerous.
So I'm basically telling you.
And I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I think it's a real
all right,
issue.
let me jump in, PJ. Let me jump in, please.
Yes, please.
That is extremely remote circumstance, and the data throughout the country, throughout the world, tells me you'll be hit by lightning before that situation arises to anybody. You have to have a lot of secondhand smoke for you to not only consume a THC compound, but to the point where you are incapacitated to operate a motor vehicle. It just doesn't happen anywhere. You look at California, you look at Colorado, you look at Montana, you look at Washington, D.C. I haven't seen any documentation of that, but I appreciate the imaginative scenario.
Yes, it's an imagined scenario, but not far-fetched. Tobacco smoke kills a lot of people secondhand.
Right. but just remember the trend. Smoking is going down. It's
That's a
plummeting.
good trend.
So the biggest buyers of marijuana buds are processing plants, processing laboratories.
Mm-hmm.
They're going up. They're going up like crazy. And not only are they going up for adult use and medical use, but they're going up to provide the cannabis compounds in different forms for research and development, for universities, for hospitals, for technology companies. It's going all over the place. It's exploding. And I'll give you a little tidbit of trivia here. The fastest growing segment of the marijuana industry is veterinarian care.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's pain relief.
Yeah, oddly enough,
Yeah.
because they found that if you read my grandfather's book, all my patients are under the bed. When he was a cat veterinarian, in the Depression, people would feed their cats before they would feed their children.
Mm-hmm.
So we all know when our pets are sick, we will do anything for them. And since they can't talk, we pamper them. Well, we also know dogs and cats will recover from ailments much faster if they're eating. But nature tells the animal not to eat. Well, if you give them a cannabis product that will enhance their appetite,
Mm-hmm.
they will eat.
Mm-hmm.
And they will get better faster.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I just had a brownie and a cookie, a CBD brownie cookie the other night. I had a fundraiser, cannabis fundraiser, and I just, by happenstance, ate it. And I had some back pain that day. It's been away ever since.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Just having CBD, which is one of the 400 compounds in cannabis,
Wow.
back pain went away.
Mm-hmm.
And,
There's no doubt it has pain relief properties. Absolutely. And you experienced that relief with not harming one single non-smoker. Good for you.
What we have now in the industry, BJ and Bill, is we're standing up a brand new industry
Mm-hmm.
that comes with science, jobs, it comes with transportation, it comes with laboratories, it comes with retail, office space, it comes with training. Our state colleges and universities, our county colleges are not only offering curriculums in cannabis studies, but now they'll be growing it through a license that I imagined and put into the bill that a university, hospital, cancer center can partner together under an R&D license. A licensee could also partner, like a private license holder, can partner with a university, cancer center, a different medical partnerships under the integrated curriculum, which I wrote. By the way, I'm very proud to say I wrote these things at the corner booth while sitting at the corner booth in the Somerset Diner.
Keeping it local. That's our
Yeah.
goal.
So integrated curriculum. So if you apply for a license and say, I'm going to have an integrated curriculum license, that means in perpetuity, you have to partner with a university or college with their curriculum, and they could send students to your facility. They can intern with the facility. They can do hands-on. They can work there. They can be employed there in perpetuity forever. That license holder has to be partnered with the university.
Mm-hmm.
Or Robert Wood Johnson and Rutgers University can establish a license together where Cook College grows it. The School of Pharmacy studies it. The School of Psychology will monitor and do counseling. And the School of Biochemistry can talk about the chromatography with the high pressure liquid chromatography, or the gas spectrometer, or the capillary electrophoresis studies. You'll understand the difference between extracting compounds and separating compounds. You can so from seed to consumption, you have science, counseling, the farming of it, the cultivating of it, everything. And then you could do it with the supervision of the oncologists, the nursing staff, the cardiologist, all of those sciences and disciplines, all in one license. And the irony is, Robert Wood Johnson and Rutgers told me it was impossible.
Huh.
Wow.
I had to go down to Camden, to Cooper, to get someone's attention, and they modified my language, and they got it in the bill for me.
How about
Wow.
My own alma mater said, "No, we can't do it." Now
That's
they're
incredible.
second in line to get one of those licenses now.
Yeah.
Then Stockton University and I think Union County College were the first to advertise a curriculum of cannabis studies. Now there's a dozen colleges doing it.
Well, that's great.
It's out there.
So
It's a whole
that's
new.
a lot of jobs, a lot of science, a lot of opportunity. And we're still 10, 20 years behind Israel, Australia, the Netherlands. We're 10 to 20 years behind them in these studies and these sciences.
Well, I'm sure. We'll pick it up. Can we just circle back just a second and talk about that underage thing? I know the police union and individual police departments have come out publicly saying that the bill was hamstring, and you mentioned that the bill was handcuffing them, I guess you'd say, in that they were not allowed to notify parents of minors who they caught with grass. Do you know? I know this is not you're not writing the I guess the amendments, but I know Pat Colligan, who is Franklin folks. If Franklin doesn't know this, Pat Colligan is the president of the state PBA. He's also a detective on the Franklin Township Police Department. Has he? Do you know? Has he signed off on these amendments?
And also, wasn't there a last-minute voting session that passed another bill establishing civil penalties for those under 21?
So, that's a lot of questions. All right, so
Just basically have the cops signed off on the amendments about the underage possession.
This third bill that establishes those civil penalties for those under 21.
which question do you want me to answer, Bills or PJ?
Both.
All right, I'm gonna start with Bill.
First.
I'm gonna go in order. So I pause a moment when I check in with other people to sign off on my legislation. I'm the legislator, and that's it. So I see law enforcement as a resource and tool for the governments they work for, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
So much of the legislation has been written because of the past practices of law enforcement. I understand, though I did not read. I understand Pat Colligan wrote a letter to his 80,000 members of law enforcement, basically encouraging them not to enforce the law involving cannabis, which is very concerning to me. But I also don't want to make the job for law enforcement any harder. I don't want to make it any more difficult. But we have to stop the disproportionate enforcement on people when it relates to cannabis or anything else. It's time to fix things. It's time to make things right. So if law enforcement doesn't like a law, they don't like it. My constituents are a louder voice than just the community of law enforcement. It's not to say I don't listen to them. I absolutely do listen to them. I have a lot of friends in law enforcement. But we have to fix this. We have to change. Law enforcement has to change the way it's doing business as it relates to not only cannabis, but our Black and brown communities. It just has to. You saw those videos. You saw the facts out there. Now, I was at the League of Municipalities with a couple of my Franklin council people standing at a reception, and there were 3 police chiefs from down the shore towns. and we had this discussion. And one police chief barked out, "I never put anyone in handcuffs that did not break the law." And the other two police chiefs applauded him. I don't believe. I do believe that is a fact, but that's not the problem. The problem is not that someone is. The problem is that they're not arresting people that are innocent, which I think sometimes happens. The problem is they're only focusing disproportionately on a certain group of our citizenry. That's the problem. So, when we have to make a social justice correction in legislation, we have to make it, regardless of what anyone, what employees of ours think. And remember, they are our employees, not the other way around.
I'd like to know which police chief it was who doesn't believe in innocent until proven guilty, but we can talk about that offline. You want to, PJ? Can you restate your question?
I'm concerned about that third bill that apparently did pass both chambers that addresses the issue of under 21 being able to be brought to justice. I do believe Murphy signed it.
So, are you talking about the original cannabis bill?
No, the bill that was designed to deal with the civil penalties of kids under 21 being able to be pursued by law enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not necessarily familiar with the bill you're referencing, but the original legislation basically stopped police from inquiring minors of their age and possession just based upon the smell, and it also stopped them from notifying their parents. There were probably 24 variations of the bill before it went to the governor's office. So, since I wasn't following it that closely, I wasn't the architect of that, or I wasn't at the table. I didn't follow it that closely. You can't get into every battle,
Yeah.
But I do know, that legislation, I agree with law enforcement, was cumbersome. And I shared the concerns of law enforcement on that aspect. I absolutely, Pat Colligan had very legitimate concerns the way that it was written. But the good news is a lot of legislators recognize this, and Senator Vingo Powell has follow-up legislation to recorrect what we wrote. And we'll continue to tweak it and make it better.
All right.
Well, it has to have safety as well as the benefit. I mean, clearly, the medical benefit is just indisputable. It's the recreational side where it becomes a choice just for fun that I think there are some issues.
All right. So we have a bunch of folks watching. Obviously, we have one person. This I don't know if it's a woman or man. Don't panic. 100% organic. has been commenting a lot as you've been speaking, and this person raises a good point about the age.
Talk to that person.
About the age. 18, 19, and 20-year-olds aren't adults. I mean, why was the age for consuming marijuana set at 21?
Right.
Same reason why
Drinking
alcohol was,
right.
But
wait. Wasn't the alcohol age raised to 21 based on a federal law based on withholding the potential withholding of federal transportation funds by one of our former senators?
Yeah, in part.
Yeah, Lautenberg. Yeah.
So,
okay.
All right. So there is science that suggests that people of the age 25 and younger can get long-term negative effects by continued and prolonged use of cannabis. Those studies I found to be legitimate. And by the way, I read so many studies. And again, just like people's testimony, you have to know who wrote the study, was it peer reviewed, who paid for the study.
Right.
Just because it comes out of Harvard doesn't mean some for-profit organization didn't pay for it.
Right.
Much like the Harvard study that said riding on airplanes is safer from COVID than being in your own home. That was paid for by the aviation industry, and Harvard released it. It wasn't peer reviewed. So you got to do your homework.
Right.
But I found enough legitimate studies to say 25 and younger, but we couldn't write legislation 25 or younger. So we just mimicked the alcohol. And
Okay.
that was a balance.
Okay, so that's why you made it 21 and not 25, even though the study showed 25 and younger? How'd that-
Right.
Okay.
I mean, alcohol is much, much unhealthier than cannabis. And that's 21.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Let's go to another somewhat controversial aspect of this decriminalization law. That is homegrown. It is still illegal to grow your own. Why is that?
I know, right? It's ridiculous. So, Bill, PJ, I'm going to tell you, I am a very strong supporter of homegrown. As a matter of fact, I may do it anyway.
You heard it here first, Franklin.
Well, you
Why
can
not?
control the content.
Come get me.
I think it's terrific.
So, there were two hardest questions that I've ever been asked about cannabis. It was while I was writing the medical components of it, right? The first question was, why are you not allowing pharmacies to sell cannabis processed products, the cannabis pills, the gummy bears, because it's a medicine. Independent pharmacists can compound their own, very often compound their own medicine by adding or subtracting compounds to suit that particular patient. They are expertly positioned to sell this medicine. So that was question number one. Question number two, if tomatoes were your medicine, why wouldn't we allow you to grow your tomatoes?
Right.
So if cannabis is a medicine, why wouldn't you allow a patient to grow their own medicine? Right? With limits. So
Sounds logical.
even in the worst cancer patients that use cannabis, they're not going to smoke more than 2 ounces a month. I've talked to many oncologists that prescribe cannabis. They never, ever had the need to go over 2. So you think of 2 ounces per month. How many ounces does a typical homegrown plant grow? How many cycles can you get? So you're talking 2 to 5 plants a year. Maybe one will be a mother plant, what they call a mother plant that never buds, but you can graft it. So I was a supporter of that. But unfortunately, I live in an environment called democracy. I couldn't get enough people to go along with it. Senator Scutari and I absolutely support a certain amount of homegrown for medicine or non-medical. But we would start with medical patients. Allow them to have 2 plants or 3 plants. Medical cannabis is very expensive. Sometimes it's 4 times more expensive than street cannabis. It's I have medical marijuana patient friends, and sometimes they'll go to the dispensary. Sometimes they'll go to their friend down the road just to save money. It's expensive. And remember, your prescription plan doesn't cover that. That's cash out of your pocket. Cash.
Now that's another subject.
Yeah.
How do we get insurance companies on board?
Well, okay. So we can only dictate to about 30% of the health insurance market in New Jersey, and that's with our state plans. The rest are federally charted that we can't dictate to them. Then you have the pharmacy benefits managers that really dictate to the pharmacies. That's a whole level of industry that I never knew existed. They're going to want a piece of it. It's complicated, and and that probably won't happen anytime soon.
Ah, that's
What
that's
makes what makes
bad.
medical marijuana so much more expensive?
Regulations, licensing, the lack of
30.
competition. So you have a lot of push and pull from the marijuana industry, because like health insurance in America, it's per state. You have a captive market in each and every state, and what's happening is, like the licensees in California, Colorado, and other states, you'll get Bill Bowman and PJ get a license. Well, you're not doing so great. You're having a hard time, and a bigger company buys your license and will buy the building, and then they do it to the next guy and the next guy, and then they move to another state, and then they do it there. So and these companies could be Canadian, they could be from the UK, Netherlands, Australia. So you have these international companies, and these multi-state companies. They're huge. I mean, these guys are traded on multiple stock markets, internationally and nationally, and they buy up these licenses. Well, they also come with money and influence, and so a lot of some of the legislation is influenced by that. So that's why Joe Danielsen, sitting in the Somerset Diner with Tara Sargente, we put in a lot of protections, more protections in New Jersey bill than any other state, protections for New Jerseyans, like the protection for disabled veterans, women, and minorities. For residents, there's a resident requirement. There's strict control for the local town councils. And we even formed the Cannabis Regulatory Commission to oversee that. Not only did we form that, but we spread the power of that out. We gave the slight majority of appointments to the governor, and we gave appointment to the Senate president and appointment to the Speaker of the Assembly. And all appointments have to go through the Senate. So it's a balance of power. So it's able to transcend gubernatorial administrations.
That's smart. So
yeah,
let's
generation.
Yeah. Well, let's talk.
Also, the employees more than likely will of marijuana licenses will be unionized.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because there's so much money to be made in cannabis. We wanted to make sure the employees had certain protections and guarantees, and there's nothing better than collective bargaining.
Well, won't that drive the price up, though?
A little bit.
Yeah.
But, your grocery stores are unionized.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of businesses and licenses, there seem to be areas that are going to be more predisposed to be granting licenses in the varying sectors of growing, marketing, distributing, retailing. How does that work? How does business? And the second part of that is, at one point we had heard that Franklin Township was being considered a designated site as a center to doing all of the above.
Well, that's a very good point, and I'm very proud of how we address this bill. So you have the medical licenses have to be spread out in 3 geographic sections of New Jersey, north, south, and central, and that's been going on. Those are evenly spread out. Where exactly in those 3 regions they're located is really up to the licensee, the towns that allow it, and the application process that grants them the license. So it's quite fair, and it's not easy to find a location. You should know this. Well, for the non-medical, it's a very complex and great system what we have, because not only is the Cannabis Regulatory Commission going to decide that, but that commission is evenly spread out throughout New Jersey. Mm-hmm. So each member of that commission, has a stake in it, and they're going to come up with a fair formula on how to spread out these licenses. So, then you have local control. You have control, whereas the town council could say, no, I don't want you located in my town.
Mm.
Which is ridiculous if they were to do that, because what's the difference if it's in your town or the town right next to you,
Mm-hmm.
right? If your favorite pizzeria is in South Bound Brook or Bound Brook, you're going to drive there, get your pizza, and bring it home.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with your local liquor store or hairdresser.
Right.
So my recommendation to mayors and council is, like any business, you should be promoting your economy in your town, and you should have a concierge, an economic development officer. You should show them around. This week alone, I'm showing my 9th and 10th company. I'm gonna drive them around Franklin to get them to familiarize them with Franklin, and that's just in cannabis. I've done manufacturers, I've done wholesalers and warehouse and distribution experts. I've done data centers. I do this all the time for the last 15 years. But this week particularly, I have 2 marijuana companies that are looking at Franklin.
That's great.
And then there's companies that I haven't met that are looking at Franklin. So they're going to bring jobs. They're going to be, some of these facilities cost $30 million. That's a lot of money.
What does that
there are
say?
certain licenses that are going to be able to be granted to small businesses with 10 or less employees. Which would be a lot of business in Franklin Township.
Right. So
and also the impact centers, if you would address that.
Right. So there's a couple things that don't exist nationally. Is license holders that are Black, Latino, or women or disabled veterans. I fixed that. I dedicated a license to them called a micro license. That micro license not only has to be dedicated to that, but you have to be a resident in those towns. There's limits on how big you can grow, but there is a path to get out of the micro category. The micro license also must be located in an impact zone. An impact zone is a zone, a town that qualifies under the definition of impact based upon population size, the number of marijuana arrests, the crime index, and the unemployment. Because of that, the way it's been defined, Franklin Township and New Brunswick, 2 of my 5 towns, are designated an impact zone.
Is that the entire township or just parts of it?
The entire township.
Okay.
So also, this is the genius part of the micro license. See, regular license, you have to compete to be granted that license. Micro license, you don't. If you qualify, you get it. However, unlike the other licenses, you can't sell your license. So you won't be glommed up by corporate.
By a larger entity.
Right, the multi-state. Plus, they probably won't qualify.
Right.
And you're not going to be big enough where you'll be attractive to them. So it will stay micro. There will be a niche boutique market for women and disabled veterans and minorities. And they could be located in Franklin Township.
Now, is this a percentage thing or a set aside?
Yes, and the micro license, there's a requirement for a dedicated percentage of all licenses to be micro and a dedicated percentage of each category of license to be micro. Wow. So they can't just forget about micro. They have to issue that.
Wow, that sounds very exciting.
And now New Jersey, look at 10 years down the road, New Jersey will have more Black people owning licenses, more women owning licenses, more disabled U.S. veterans owning licenses, and it's going to stay that way.
Wow. Bravo.
Unless someone changes the law on me, then you're going to see Joe Danielsen stand up and fight.
No, that's very exciting.
Can you quantify that for Franklin? I mean, how many of these micro licenses could Franklin have?
No, I can't.
Okay. So the set aside is a minimum, right? The set aside is not a maximum.
Minimum.
Okay.
Minimum. I tell you, we had a workshop, which is very seldom done. We had a workshop, legislative workshop on this. Because I went around the state holding hearings. I brought together a consortium of legislators, lobbyists, and doctors. But then Steve Sweeney, Senate President, called for a workshop. We went every week throughout the summer several years ago, and we all sat in a room. Steve Sweeney, Speaker Coughlin, me, Senator Vitale, Senator Scutari, Jamel Holly, and we hashed out all these details. And at one point, Steve Sweeney said, Danielsen, where else in the country are they doing this? Where's this been done before? And I turned around and I said, Steve, I'm proud to say nowhere.
Hey,
we are the first and only. And Franklin Township is going to benefit.
Excellent. I just want to divert real quick, just 1 second while I have you talking about set-asides. And you and I have spoken about this before. I want to get your public commitment to this today. A number of years ago, when I was a staff writer for the Asbury Park Press, I did a series of stories that inspired a couple legislators down there, singer and dancer, which I always thought was a very funny combination, to sponsor legislation setting aside 30% of all state contracts to veteran-owned businesses. Governor Christie vetoed it because he said he didn't like set-asides. It really went no. I think the language was changed to say that the state encourages veteran-owned businesses to apply for state contracts. You and I have spoken about this, and I wanted to get your commitment today that is something. Establishing a set-aside for veteran-owned businesses is something that you will work for. Businesses,
absolutely. I'm a veteran, and every man and some of the women in my family are Army veterans, going back 114 years. We're all Army. But however, I think we all can agree the highest level of citizenry is our veterans. And we don't do enough for our veterans. Matter of fact, our veterans are often ignored, disregarded, and forgotten. Veterans have the highest level of homelessness, unemployment, suicide than any other category. And it's shameful on a human scale. It's shameful how we treat our veterans. Just look what happened at the Menlo Park Veterans Home last year, where 102 of them died. It's a lot of people. So whatever we can do for our veterans, especially our disabled veterans, come on. I mean, who else deserves more than our veterans?
Great. I will be following up with you on that. So thank you for the diversion, and thank you for letting me put you on the spot like that. Franklin Township, what has Franklin Township done to prepare itself for this onslaught of entrepreneurs, of marijuana entrepreneurs?
Well, so Franklin Township really is a great town, and many international and multi-state companies have recognized Franklin, and that's why we've had at least a dozen come to Franklin. But Mayor Kramer and the rest of the council members did something that was very proactive. They voted on and passed unanimously a resolution inviting marijuana business to come to Franklin. Now, I don't recall if that was just medical or just generically marijuana.
I think at the time it had been medical.
Yeah. So what I'm going to suggest to council is that they make two changes.
Yes.
One change is to genericize that resolution and just say all cannabis, because if they don't, they may not get a micro license here. The other thing that I'm going to suggest that the mayor and council do is write a general letter to the public. It's a little less formal. It's called a letter of support. And, it's not something they vote on, but something that they can all join to. This way, anyone who is interested in Franklin and they're putting together an application, they'll have a resolution and a generic letter of support. Those two documents weigh heavy in the application process, especially the competitive process. If they do it generic, they're not playing favorites to one company, one applicant, or the other. But the application process is very important for a regular license, a medical license, and a micro license, because it takes, some companies spend $400,000 or $500,000 on the application process alone, plus attorney, plus lobbyists, plus their government affairs team. it gets expensive. And that all adds to the final product of the cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
Right. How big an industry is the cannabis industry in the United States? Do you know?
Billions.
I
Billions.
mean, legalized cannabis. Let's put that way.
Yeah. I mean, listen, but the vast amount, proportion of the profit is still going to the cartels in South America.
Right.
Matter of fact, and they're shipping in less and less cannabis to America. They're growing it here. It's being grown. They're not. I can't say they're growing it here, but it's being grown here. But remember, those cartels, historically they grow it there, they transport it here, but they don't need to do that as much anymore because it's being grown here. But they still have transportation, distribution. They still have their channel partners. They still have their retail. They have all those other market elements to still make the same amount of profit, and that money's leaving the U.S. And the U.S. grows some of the best marijuana in the whole world.
Really?
There's right now there are lots of marketplaces that are currently selling CBC. I'll be all right. Cannabis products that are without the THC, which is the element that makes one high, and those sales are really escalating. But they're very, very common. I've seen them in several pharmacies. One in particular, right down Route 27, called MedLife, and they have they have oils and pills and gummies and an entire line for veterinary use, specifically little calming things that are combined with hemp. I have one for one of my dogs who needs to be calmed every once in a while. So the element of the THC is now going to be added back in and going to somewhat
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So, there's over 400 compounds in cannabis. THC is the one compound that's illegal. So they extract that out and they leave the rest of the compounds, one or more of them, in there. Particularly CBD is the second most favorite useful compound. They're discovering more compounds as time goes on. And then through research, development, trial, and study, they're finding the benefit of other compounds that get isolated. So you're going to see that. So with the absence of THC, you could do, you could sell anything you want with those other compounds in there, and they are becoming very, very common. You're going to see them in grocery stores and convenience stores. It's only when you have THC that you have to be regulated.
Exactly. So it's going to be interesting how they compete with each other.
Yeah, but what else? So in the final bill, we have a list of different licenses. You can have a license that just is a cultivator that grows it, a license to manufacture, which is, we call that a processor. And a processor is basically a combination of a chemistry lab and a commercial kitchen. We have a wholesaler license. You have a distributor license. You have a retail license. And then what's really great is you have a delivery license. So you don't even have to go to the establishments. You can have them delivered right to your house. So, and every one of those licenses is an investment into Franklin Township, our tax base. Every one of those licenses produces new jobs and moves money around our local economy.
Is there a cost for these licenses?
There's a cost to every license in New Jersey.
These particular licenses?
Yes. There's a cost that doing any business you're starting with a cost. But some of these licenses are more competitive than others. And you can have more than one license. You're going to have businesses that hold every one of these licenses. We call that a fully integrated license holder.
So if I want to do one of the micro licenses, I want to just open up a shop somewhere. a retail store, how much am I looking to invest?
Well, are you a disabled veteran, a woman, or a black man?
Well,
I meet one of those criteria.
yeah, say for
You
the
do.
argument that somebody meets that one of those criteria.
So I can't answer that. There's too many variables, but you're going to probably need a consultant
Okay.
to guide you through that, probably an attorney, and you're going to need someone to put your application together.
Mhm.
And then you're going to have to find a location for it. You're going to need town council to allow it. And then you're probably going to need to renovate whatever location you select
Mhm.
so that it will be meet the requirements and
Makes sense.
criteria that the Cannabis Regulatory Commission sets forth.
Okay.
So it's not a garage-based business.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. Apparently, yeah.
It's a legitimate business. I mean, if you were to open up a McDonald's or a Starbucks, you're going to be spending a lot of money, regardless if it's how small it is.
Right. Okay. All right.
It's a legitimate business, but it's one that women, disabled veterans, and minorities can get. It's safe. No one can buy it out from you, and you can't pretend because you have to be a resident of this location. And and it's only 22 towns in New Jersey out of 350 that can have a micro license. Franklin, New Brunswick are some of them.
So
Right.
if someone wants to open one of these businesses and apply for this micro license, can they start doing it now? And what's the process and where do they go?
They're not going to be able to do much until the Cannabis Regulatory Commission gets established and up on their feet, and they start publishing application.
Is there a time frame projected?
I don't have one yet.
Okay. And these micro licenses are just available for the people in those three groups you mentioned, or can anybody apply for micro license?
Just those three groups.
Okay.
Well,
So
then.
is that majority owner? I mean, if I wanted to partner with a woman or a black man or a disabled vet, that person would have to be the majority owner, or is that how it would work?
So 100% of the ownership must reside in New Jersey. 51% owners must reside in the town.
Okay.
And the 51% would have to be one of those three categories.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, then,
Interesting.
are there
Very
grants available for these kind of investments?
I haven't heard of any, but the Economic Development Commission might.
Mm-hmm.
It all depends on the budgetary process. It
Yeah.
might. So also the good thing is, the tax levy. So what we want to do is get rid of sales tax on the medical, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like any other medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to shift it all to the non-medical. So this cannabis will be 6.2%, 6.625%, like anything else in New Jersey. But the vast majority of that tax will be set aside for the impact zone towns.
Mm-hmm.
So now we get another benefit for programs and studies and jobs and expungement costs, which are very expensive. But also in the bill, we are allowing towns to have establish a municipal tax on cannabis if they want to. That's a 2% sales tax on every transaction. So if a cultivator sells to a processor and a retail sells to the customer, each of those transactions is taxable up to 2% each. So that could potentially add up to 6% for the town. However, I caution towns to even do that, because if they do establish it, that vendor may just move out of town or go to another town that's not taxing.
Right.
Or the customers may go to another town to buy to avoid that 6%, because remember, it's costly. We want to put the black market out of business for cannabis, for pot. So it's all about keeping your costs low, but it's also a competition among towns.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I'd also like to touch. You just touched on the expungement part of this law.
Yeah. So some of the tax money generated by marijuana sales will go towards helping those with marijuana offenses, certain marijuana offenses,
Mm-hmm.
their records expunged, which is a very complicated, complex,
Oh, I'll bet.
expensive process.
I'll bet. But that
Because
doesn't necessarily mean if you have been caught with possession and you've been in a 5-year sentence, that the doors are open to you and you're leaving. There's still the process to go through, but now the charges would be then dropped as well as expunged.
Yeah, for example, say a state trooper arrested Bill Bowman on Rutgers University in New Brunswick. To expunge that, you're going to have to approach the New Brunswick police, Rutgers police, the state police, Rutgers University, the municipal court, the superior court, and maybe the attorney general's office. All those facilities and institutions have to be approached to fully expunge.
Wow.
If you don't, and it's not their responsibility, it's your responsibility. And if some people think, a judge granted me expungement. He or she granted you expungement, but they did not remove those records. And even if you did some, if one's still out there, and someone does a background check on you, they may find it.
But if it is now the law that penalty no longer exists against you, it's a matter of process then. No?
It's a matter of it's not illegal now, but if you have a record, and it could be just an incident report,
Mm-hmm.
right, or no charge. It could be an arrest with no charge.
Mm-hmm.
It could be an arrest with a charge but no conviction. It could be an incident report that resulted in arrest, a charge, and a conviction.
All concerning somebody being caught
Cannabis.
with a certain amount, an ounce amount of
Right.
an illegal substance.
So you're going to need help, and most people that this will involve are going to be on a lower economic scale,
Mm-hmm.
predominantly Black or brown community members.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing this bill does is it doesn't preclude people from license holding or employment in the cannabis industry if they've had a charge in the past. There's protections for employers and there's protection for employees. There's some protections for our minors and our adults. It's a very proactive, progressive, thought out bill. Is it perfect? Not by a long shot.
But it's in
There's
process.
a lot of interest. Yeah, there were a lot of interest, a lot of people at the table in the process. It was more complex of a process than I could have ever imagined.
Wow, I'm sure.
From the social justice to the economics to the business to enforcement to regulation, safety, the sciences. The next area I'm working on is the laboratory and third-party testing of it all. Because remember,
I want to ask you about that.
Well, we don't have an FDA. See, the federal government, they have an FDA, but they won't let us use it because it's not legal. So we have to kind of be our own FDA, and the state government doesn't have the resources to do it on their own. So we have to stand up yet a new industry, another industry that already exists, the laboratory industry in New Jersey. That they exist because of the pharmaceutical industry in New Jersey. So we have to make sure that we don't have mold, microcontaminants, pesticides, extraction agents, all sorts of things that could be in this product that is not only being grown, but it's processed into pills, gummy bears. We have to determine the stability, the shelf life, chain of custody, batch control, archive batch requirements. We have to determine what limits of compounds are in there, the potency of each one. I mean, there's a lot, and we have to do it. So that's the next area I'm working on.
All right. And the regulatory commission is going to set those standards?
It will be some by that, and some by the Department of Health, and some by legislation. Legislation, I don't know what it'll look like, because that'll be a negotiated point. How much detail do we legislate, and how much is just done through regulation. So, I mean, you have to get everybody at the table. It's a long, drawn out process.
Mega industry, the potential of it to really boost itself in Franklin Township.
Absolutely.
Jobs is sensational.
We lost a significant amount of our pharmaceutical industry. They moved out of New Jersey, but so this could help grow the laboratory industry, particularly the chromatography.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a jobs bill for a lot of different areas.
It is. It is.
All right. Well, we want to thank you, State Assemblyman Joe Danielsen, also known as the Birthday Boy, for coming on with us today. We've put out a lot of information about this bill and what it is and what it isn't, and what its potential is. So, we're looking forward. We're going to be following this. Obviously, we're going to be following this in terms of what the Township Council will do, if anything, in terms of, as you suggested, amending the law, the ordinance that they have on the books now, and allowing for retail. And I have a feeling they probably will. That's just my sense of it, but I don't know that for a fact. So
I think so. They're pretty. Franklin council members are very open-minded. They're not so doomsday as some other councils,
right?
And if you don't do this early,
exactly,
you're going to lose out to other towns. I can almost assure you, North Brunswick, New Brunswick, Southbound Brook, other towns will do it, and those companies, in a heartbeat, will go there instead.
Right. All right.
And what we might also have is, if you have enough cannabis business in town, that will also bring laboratory business to town too.
Right.
So you could create an ecosystem of industries here, because the laboratories would rather travel less,
of course,
than travel further. The dispensaries, the cultivators. So if Franklin does it right, they could create an ecosystem here. And so far, they're doing the council's doing the right thing, smart things.
We'll follow up on that. Thank you.
Oh, definitely. We'll be having these conversations, I have a feeling, on a regular basis.
Yeah, we'll probably have maybe the mayor will come in.
Yes, exactly. I was going to suggest that.
Assemblyman Joe Danielsen.
Very interesting.
We could do a group discussion over the matter if the mayor's interested.
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure.
So, Assemblyman Danielsen, thank you very much for coming on with us this morning. We really appreciate the accommodation, and you have a great rest of your birthday.
Yes,
I will. Thank you very much for the birthday wishes, and thank you very much for providing a critical First Amendment service to all the residents and businesses of Franklin Township and the surrounding area.
Great. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate that. Thank you.
And we will see you again soon.
Yes, sooner
I look
than you
forward
think.
to it.
Take care. Take care.
All right. Bye now.
Thank you.
All right. That was a lot of information. That was good stuff.
My head's spinning a little bit.
Yeah. So there's a lot of opportunities for folks who have lost the most historically in terms of marijuana legislation, in terms of incarceration and fines and whatnot. Give them a chance to sort of make up for that, although you can't make up for jail time served.
I love the idea of the micro licensing.
Yeah, he did that with medical
That's
marijuana.
very, very beneficial It's just that if the process can be streamlined, that it isn't so time cumbersome.
Well, it's going to be devised by politicians, so it's going to be as
Mhm.
cumbersome as absolutely humanly possible,
Or as necessary.
or as possible. So, yeah, that was and who was that?
Excuse me.
Don't panic. 100% organic. Uh,
Who
Thank
was
you so
that?
much for. I don't know who that person is, but thank you for your comments and your contributions to the conversation today. Really appreciate it.
That sounds as homegrown as you can get.
Yeah, for real. Yeah. So, all right. Well, um, I think we really covered the topic. I don't know that there's anything more to say, other than we will be watching what the township council does. They've,
Hmm.
as I recall, well, everything they do is unanimous, but it was a unanimous vote to allow for medical marijuana processing, growing, and distribution in town, in the manufacturing zones. So they will have to take some action to allow for retail in retail zones and commercial zones. And I'm thinking Hamilton Street, because that's
Hmm.
although there are a lot of vacant storefronts in town, unfortunately, down 27 and
Hmm.
some of the other strip centers that we have in town. There's a lot
Yes,
of
definitely could use an injection of new business that is not going away.
yeah.
It's just the promise of it. Uh, it I think it's the promise of it for me that's significant is the medical usage. And of
Sure.
course, the veterinary usage. I think that was very interesting that Joe's comment was that he had something in a food product and he experienced a relief in back pain.
Yeah.
That's extraordinary.
Try that.
That is just extraordinary. And
Yeah.
that's, again, I'll give another shout out to MedLife on Route 27, family owned pharmacy. And they do right now have several of the CBD products, the cannabis products, without the TCH element to it. And again,
THC.
the animal THC. Did I say TCH? The products that are safe for animals. So it's here to stay. We just have to get it in place.
Yeah.
And again, use it wisely and be respectful of your neighbors. I'm really passionate about not having secondhand smoke from yet another source that has the potential to be more devastating on that level.
Well, you just don't want to
So brownie up, Franklin.
brownie up. Gummy up.
And here's a little tidbit I bet Franklin doesn't know with the Franklin Report and Advocate. I know Bill Bowman is smiling. He knows where I'm going with this. Bill Bowman is quite the baker. Bill Bowman has adopted many of his mother's passed down Italian cookie pastry recipes. Now, are you planning to add a little extra something
A little something
to Muzzy Bowman's
to the
creations?
to the Anizetto to the else? No, I don't know. I think Mom would. I don't know how Mom would feel about that.
She's laughing right now. I can hear her.
I don't know how she'd feel about that. We never spoke about that. It
No,
could happen.
there was no need and there was no opportunity, but one can always improve on one's creativity.
That's true. That's true. As far as what he was talking about the black market, the street dealers, and they're always, you're always going to have that because people are always going to want to do that. And if marijuana becomes not profitable enough for them or too hard for them to sell, they're just going to move. And they already are. I mean, they're already selling harder drugs. So I don't think that's going to have much impact on that. But, the township's doing other things to clean up that situation, especially downtown.
If there's just too much benefit for product A over product B with no negative effects.
All right.
But the end result is what it's supposed to be or what it's perceived to be.
I forgot to put our wrap-up sign up. There you go.
Oh, wrap up. There we
So
go.
that was what we just did.
Yes, we wrapped it.
So as usual, Franklin, if you want to, if you have a news story that you think should be covered, or you have a comment about a news story that was written, or the occasional editorial that we do, you can contact me at editor@franklinreporter.com. If you would like to sponsor the Franklin Reporter, because we survive on our sponsors, we survive on our advertisers, and we survive on our subscribers. This is our business. This is our livelihood. This is what we do to put food on the table and shoes on the feet. You can contact PJ Parker at ads@franklinreporter.com. Our website is www.franklinreporter.com. That's where the 24/7 news site is. That's the original Franklin Reporter news site that we started back in the summer of 2013, and we're coming up on 8 years, I guess. We're on Twitter. I'm saying a lot lately. We're on Twitter at Franklin Editor. You can also find us on Facebook, Franklin Reporter, on the Insta, which I love saying, Franklin_reporter_and_advocate. We're also on YouTube.
Also YouTube. When we switched to the this platform where we have been simultaneously broadcasting live, not only to Facebook but also to YouTube. And I know that's a very. Do we have that we can put that up?
No, we don't have. That's a good thought, because we need you to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. YouTube only we haven't really pushed it. We've put things up there in the past occasionally, but we really haven't focused on YouTube. But YouTube only allows you. YouTube has a threshold of subscribers before they give you your YouTube/Franklin Reporter address. So right now,
interesting. So it's a cumbersome link.
Yeah, it's a bunch of numbers and letters. Basically, right now you go to YouTube, you type in the search bar Franklin Reporter, and you'll find us. But until and then subscribe, please, because it'd be nice to have that as another outlet. Again, if you want to know what's happening in town every morning, you can subscribe to the Morning Report, which is a daily newsletter that goes out, an email newsletter that goes out. You can subscribe there. You can subscribe to that rather on the Franklin Reporter website, www.franklinreporter.com. Look for our monthly newspaper, the Monthly Digest. And speaking of advertisers, please support our advertisers. Please tell them that you saw their ad in the Franklin Reporter. That's very important, because it lets them know that we are working for them, and we want to make sure that we're doing that, getting the word out about the services and products that they offer to Franklin Township. I have nothing else.
If there are businesses or events or charitable organizations who can use a boost, that's what we do these news hours for, and the live streams directly in the community. Yeah. And you also have the option, speaking of advertising opportunities, to sponsor the live streams and or the news hours, where you get a featured chat about yourself, your business, at the beginning of the news hour or the beginning of the live stream, and also at the wrap-up point at the end. So you do then have the opportunity to conjoin with us by promoting your business or service or product with the Franklin Reporter and Advocates outreach into the community in this platform.
Right.
So we welcome that as well.
Right. We are homegrown, Franklin. We are not corporate owned. We do not answer to folks from out of town, out of state, even, as some do. We are Franklin Township people, and we are all about Franklin Township, and only Franklin Township. Other media that you'll read that cover Franklin Township, we're also going to cover towns in the region, other counties. We know that Franklin Township people want to read about Franklin Township, and that's what we provide. So please support us, advertise, subscribe, talk about us, say nice things, and so on. All right, Franklin, as usual, until we meet again, stay safe. PJ, say that thing that you always say.
And we at the Franklin Reporter and Advocate will be back.
We will.